What's good, everyone? This is Justin Just Rock Ramon from the Just Right podcast, where elevation is our recreation. Super excited for you to check out our next episode as it features an esteemed guest who goes by the name Alan Salazar, aka Fast Runner. He is a native storyteller and educator, tribal spiritual advisor, Native American activist, Chumash canoe paddler, and tribal elder in the Fernandeno Tataviam and Ventureno Chumash tribes. What makes this conversation so special is that Alan was our first ever tribal elder guest in the show. It was an incredibly expansive conversation where we chatted about his first meaningful memories out in nature, how his father played a major role in him embracing his indigenous roots, sacred mountain landscapes and his top trails in Southern California, the importance of revitalizing tribal culture along with wildlife and native plants, what the Chumash and Tataviam tribes are most known for, the importance of storytelling in tribal culture, presiding over the burial of celebrity mountain lion P22, tribal wisdom and tips when exploring out in nature, the history of building Chumash canoes and being featured in a Patagonia film, his once-in-a-lifetime experience of being a part of the first canoe crossing the Channel Islands in over 150 years, the California bounty system, and how tribal people built California, and the one outdoor experience he would relive all over again. Much love to the Museum of Ventura County for graciously allowing us to record this episode in their beautiful back patio courtyard. This museum is a true gem, preserving and celebrating the rich history, art, and culture of Ventura County. If you have not visited yet, you're missing out on some incredible exhibits and events that bring their community stories to life. Huge thanks to the team over there for all their hospitality. Make sure to give them a visit in downtown Ventura and check them out more on their website, venturamuseum.org. In addition to this YouTube video version you are watching right now, we have audio versions available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and on all the other major streaming platforms. You can find those links in the description. All right, let's get to trekking and get into this episode. All right, y'all, we are back at it, back outdoors, out here in the Museum of Ventura County. And I'm just so over the moon right now because right here next to me is our first ever tribal elder guest, an indigenous voice to grace our show. I'm here with the one and only Alan Salazar. I'm just so honored and excited to say, welcome to the Just Trek podcast, Alan.
Thank you. Hamanat Netawan Puchu Kyayak Netawan Alan Salazar Pasekva Nukasin Chogayanga Tapu Nukasin. What I just said was hello, I'm Fast Runner, Alan Salazar, and I trace back to the villages of Pasekva, which is San Fernando, California, where I was born. And my tribal ancestors trace back to the Tataviam village of Chogoyanga, where Magic Mountain is currently built, and the Chumash village of Tapu, which is in Simi Valley, a little bit east of us. So,
amazing intro. And that name, Fast Runner, how did you get that name? Is it as obvious as the name entails?
In my tribal traditions, usually in the old days, the grandparents would give the kids the names. But my parents named me Alan after Francis Allen, who was a Northern Paiute and was my pop's best friend when he was in the Marines. And then when you get older, you can change your name. And I used to go by Spirit Hawk. And then during the pandemic, I had time to reflect and think. And I've always been a big believer in the Greek philosophy, know thyself, which is also a tribal belief. Know your strengths, your weaknesses, what are your gifts. And I've been blessed with several gifts, but the one that I first became aware of was my ability to run real fast. I wish I could still do it. My ankles are shot, and I go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week and try and build up the ankles, and my hope is to compete in master track meets. If I can't run 100-meter races, I'll just switch over and I'll be a shot putter.
Shot putter. Those shoes you got right here are pretty stylish. They're really fresh. I want a pair of those.
Yeah, Kyrie Irving's tribal basketball shoes. So.
Oh wait, really, Kyrie Irving?
Yeah. Yes.
It's a collaboration.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool.
As a tribal person, it was good to see an NBA player acknowledging his tribal ancestry and smudging arenas before he played in games and things like that, because my understanding is approximately half of African Americans in America have Native American ancestry. So there's a whole bunch of other basketball players that have some Choctaw, some Cherokee, some Seminole, maybe even some Chumash, who knows?
Who knows? Who knows?
For whatever reasons, none of them are acknowledging it. Kyrie, so I wanted to support him for him supporting his tribal roots, and so I bought a pair of his shoes.
Shout out to Kyrie.
Yeah, Kyrie, way to go.
It looks like you got a new player. You got AD from the Lakers, that whole trade that made the sports world go upside down, and now the Lakers got Luka Doncic.
He killed my Warriors, though, the other night. He scored like 38 points, and even without all of their centers, they still beat the Warriors, but that's sports.
That's the coolest story I heard. I'll definitely look more into the Kyrie Irving acknowledging his native ancestry.
Yeah.
And Alan, can you speak more to the space that we're recording in right now and your relationship with the Museum of Ventura County?
Yes, we're at the Museum of Ventura County. It's in downtown Ventura, right on Main Street, right across from the Mission. I've had a relationship with the museum for quite a few years. I moved here in '95, so they graciously carry my books that my wife and I do. They invite me to come here and do storytelling occasionally. They're like most museums in that they're a nonprofit and they're working on a limited budget, but they do really good work and they reach out to the Chumash community. So not just to me, Julie Tuamite, Matthew Vasudu, Eleanor Fishburne, a lot of the tribal, local Chumash tribal leaders and tribal community. They reach out to make sure that their Chumash displays are as authentic as possible, it's a small museum, but it's one of my favorite museums in Ventura County.
Yeah, I just love how this all worked out because, originally we were going to record in the park, but because of the rain, we had to move the date around. And you had mentioned to me, maybe we can do it at the Museum of Ventura County. I looked it up, gave them a call, and I mean, it's just so in alignment with who you are and the work that you do, and you being a guest on this show. I mean, we have an op right behind us.
Yes.
We got these beautiful murals. There's even to the right of us, I don't know if you can see it in the frame, but it says, "You have arrived at the village of Chumash."
Yes.
So I'm glad it all worked out this way, because the park would have been cool, but I think this is much more intentional, much more in alignment. So thank you for the suggestion.
Everything worked out, so it's really great. So.
Yeah, I saw the exhibit as I walked in. It had the history to the Chumash plank canoes. It had the paddles, and I was just like, "Oh, this is the place to be right now."
Yeah, and I haven't even noticed, but I made a 6-foot canoe model for the museum here. I finished it just a little bit over a month ago, and they had a program, and I brought it and gave it to them, and I'm not even sure where it's at on display, but.
Very cool. Yeah, you make things and then it ends up somewhere in some exhibit around Ventura County. So Alan, I'll never forget how I first met you. It was back in December 2023, and I attended the Winter Solstice Art Show, and it was hosted by the National Park Service and Samo Fund.
Yes.
And it was at the Satwewa Native American Indian Cultural Center grounds.
Yes.
And I remember I was exploring the different booths, and there was native arts and crafts, instruments. And then I finally came across your booth, and you were selling tribal storybooks like we have here on display, abalone shells, and there was even a seaweed rattle.
Yes.
And it was just so crazy because when I saw you at the booth, I instantly recognized you. Because a few weeks prior to that event, I had watched the Patagonia film on YouTube. Yeah. Chumash powered the craft of building Chumash canoes. So it was such a pleasant surprise to meet you in that moment. I was like, that's the guy in the film I just watched. Like, it was so serendipitous. And another thing from that day I remember is you're one of the featured artists. And you actually blessed the opening ceremony with your tribal brothers. And I'll never forget this. You all sang a chant, and it went something like this. It was, Iname, Iname, Iname Chichayo. Hopefully I didn't butcher that.
No, that was great. Perfect. Yeah.
And it always stuck in my mind. But could you refresh my memory to the significance of that song chant and why you did it at that ceremony?
Yes. Well, one, the ceremony was before the winter solstice. So it was a few days before the winter solstice. And that's a Chumash bear song, a bear teasing song. So lots of times around the winter solstice, I'll sing that song at my opening and blessings, and then to let people know that on December 21st, I'll stop singing that song. And I won't sing that song or tell any bear stories until the spring equinox, when the bears come out of hibernation, and we do another ceremony to waken them up, and then we start singing our bear songs. And bear is very important to many tribes all around the world, but in California, bear has healing powers. So when I sing that song, I'm singing it to honor the bears, to ask for this to be strong like the bear, and if any of my family or friends are sick, to send some of that healing energy to them. So it's a very important song.
Yeah, because I remember after you did the chant, which by the way is so catchy, which is why I brought it up. You were going around in a circle to everybody and saying some words, I think, or even chanting more. And I was like, wow, this is a very beautiful ceremony. I'd never been a part of something like that or experienced it.
It's something that I enjoy doing. It's important to me as a tribal person to acknowledge my traditional songs and acknowledge my traditional ways. They were almost lost in the last 20 years or so. There's been a revitalization of traditional songs, traditional ceremony, traditional arts and crafts like seaweed rattles and things like that. So it's a good day to be indigenous.
And you're a big part of this big revitalization. And to bring it back to this little showcase over here, you brought some of your tribal storybooks. And what do we have over here?
Well, and whenever I do a program, I always bring this and acknowledge my family and my ancestors. So everyone on here, over here, they're all from my father's side of the family. Everyone on this picture panel over here was born in San Fernando, California.
Wow.
And the reason all my father, my aunts and uncles, my grandparents, my great-grandparents were born in San Fernando because of the San Fernando mission. So my Chumash Tataviam Ventureno Chumash, which is a small tribe around Encino, they were part of the slave labor workforce and part of the native peoples that built the San Fernando mission. So for about 5 or 6 generations, my tribal families were born in San Fernando, either on the mission or in the town of San Fernando. Then on this side, I have my mom, who is from Hanford, California. It's where I grew up as a young boy. We moved from San Fernando to Hanford when I was 2, and my mom is Portuguese and English.
Portuguese and English, okay.
Yes.
And your dad is the one of native descent.
Yes.
Tataviam and Chumash.
Yes.
Wow. And these tribal books, one is called Chumash Stories, and the other one is Tata, this is a tongue twister,
Yes.
Tata the Tataviam Towi.
Yes. So my wife is an artist, very, very talented. She does her art the way tribal people all around the world have done their art. So all these beautiful drawings are done with earth pigments. So ochres are soft chalk stones. They're used all around the world. African people used ochres in Africa. The European tribal people, when my English and Portuguese ancestors were hunters and gatherers and living a tribal lifestyle, used ochres to make their paint. All of our books, my wife makes all of her own paints out of ochres, which are these. So ochres are soft chalk stones. They come in all the colors of the rainbow. You just have to look for them. Rivers and creeks are a good place. And then what we do, I write the stories, my wife does the art, and we've done 4 books. Tata the Tataviam Towi, a story of a young Towi bird and teenagers being teenagers, a Tataviam creation story. These 2 books are original stories that I wrote.
Original stories, okay.
And I wrote them in the spirit of my Tataviam ancestors. We're a very small tribe and we're close to extinction, so there's not a lot known about our stories, our language, and things like that. It's pretty well lost. And what we do is kind of unique. in that in all of our books we have history. So besides the art lessons, how to make paint from ochres, how to make charcoal so you can make black paint. So there's history lessons, art lessons. So no one knows anything about the Tataviam. If I was to go and ask 100 people on Main Street right now in Ventura, not a single one would know who the Tataviam people are.
Wow.
And where they're from and how they survived. And then we did the second and third books we did were Chumash Stories and Coyote Rescues Hawk, and they're traditional Chumash stories. And in the Chumash books, we have Chumash history. The schools have started picking up on Chumash stories because it has 5 traditional stories, and each story gives you a little insight into the culture. So these 2 stories here give you insight into the Tataviam culture. These 2 books give you insight into the Chumash culture, and Chumash Stories has 5 stories, 5 history lessons. We write stories that we hope people enjoy hearing and reading, and then we sneak in some history because most Americans know very little history about Native American tribes, or at least accurate history.
And I assume that's a big inspiration of why you created these books, to preserve your Native heritage, for it to be passed down, and also to do some storytelling to a young and older folk, right?
You think I've been a storyteller probably almost all of my life. I tell kids I was at Ventura Charter Elementary School 2 days ago, 4th graders, and I was telling the 4th graders, I believe storytelling is very important, and it's a very important skill to have. All of us are storytellers. Some of us are good, some of us are not too good. And I believe everyone should practice telling a good story. And I tell kids all the time, and young people, old people, there's going to be times in your life that you're going to need to be able to tell a good story. And I told the 4th graders, I go, if you're like me, you might get sent to the principal's office every now and then. I was a little mischievous, especially when I was a teenager. And I was able to tell a good story when I went to the principal's office. When I had to sit in the vice principal's office, Mr. Valenage, I told a good story. And we became friends. I would see him every morning. I would wave to Mr. Valenage. How you doing today, Mr. Valenage? Good. He goes, how are you doing, Alan?
That's great.
And I became friends with someone that had to discipline me because I told a good story. So I think storytelling in tribal cultures is how we pass down our history, our knowledge. It's an important skill to have and practice.
That's funny. You got brought into the principal's office. You told a good story, and he was like, or she, you're dismissed.
Yes.
Thank you for that story.
Yeah.
Storytelling is everything. The typical format of this podcast, the Just Right podcast, is having guests and amplifying their voices, whether they're wildlife photographers, a tribal elder, a mountaineer, an author, writer. But once in a while, I have a handful of solo episodes, and to your point, I need to learn to tell a good story because it's just my voice. And whenever I do more of these solo episodes, I actually did a solo episode to last year. I gifted myself a solo birthday adventure to Channel Islands National Park, the island of Limu, your ancestral home. And this was at the end of March of last year. And I gotta tell you, Alan, that was like one of the most special birthdays I ever had. I did it as a solo trek, a solo adventure. Got into that Ventura Harbor. I think it was an hour-long ferry ride. Arrived on Limu Island or Santa Cruz, the main one. I think it's the largest island
one,
of the 5. And I did a 10-mile hike that I just trail ran, hiked up to the peaks. And then after I got done with all that, it was just, I felt like I was just in another world out there.
Yeah.
And I almost missed my boat ride back, but I had the best time of my life, and I can't wait to talk more about Channel Islands and Limu further into this podcast. And storytelling I know is a massive part of your life's work, especially.
Yes.
All right, Alan, so before we learn more about your Native background and your work with your tribal communities and your recent adventures, I do want to learn more about you and your relationship with nature and dig deeper into that. So I want you to take us back. What would you say was your first meaningful memory out in Mother Nature, and how did it impact you?
Well, like I said, when I was 2 years old, we left San Fernando and we moved to Hanford, California. And Hanford, California is a small dairy farming community in the San Joaquin Valley, about 30 miles south of Fresno. And this was 1953. So from 1953 to 1963, we lived in the San Joaquin Valley in Hanford, California. And on the northern edge of the town of Hanford, California, is the Kings River.
Kings River.
The Kings River.
Okay.
And you have to realize the San Joaquin Valley, the summers are brutal. 110, it gets hot. And it'll stay above 100 for 2 months. There won't be a day that it drops below 100 degrees. And we didn't have air conditioning back in the 50s and early 60s. So my first remembrance of being out in nature, one was out in the country and farmland and horse ranches and dairy farms. But my father worked in construction, and we did this almost every day during the summer. My mom would fix a picnic lunch dinner, fried chicken a lot of times, but something that we could eat, down by the river there, the Kings River. And we'd go down at the Kings River around 5 o'clock on a hot June, July, August day and have a picnic dinner, which as a little boy I thought,
wow,
oh, how cool, we get to eat with our hands and just, and then that's how you cooled off. And I learned how to swim in the Kings River. I'm not sure what the local tribal people called it. I've never found out, but I'm sure they probably had a different name for it. And as I got older and started learning more about my Chumash and Tataviam and ancestry, the village of Chagoyanga is on the Santa Clara River.
Okay.
So I kind of go, oh, okay, there's a connection. As a young boy, we moved to Hanford because my grandfather, Manuel Salazar, was what I call an Indian cowboy.
Indian cowboy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he had horses, would go to rodeos, trained horses for some of the old Western movie sets, for the Camarillos. He worked at Camarillo Ranch. And my pop wanted his kids to grow up in the country. And Hanford land was much cheaper, so we bought 2 acres. We moved there so we could have horses and grow up in the country, which I did. And it was a wonderful life, a wonderful exposure to the natural world.
Yes, yes.
My father was a hard-working man, and we never went on vacations. And one of my second experiences in nature was when I think I was about 11, and this was the closest we ever came to a vacation. My pop was working for a plastering contractor. He's a plasterer by trade. And they had work in the Sequoia National Forest. They were building some cabins and public restrooms, and this plastering contractor got the plaster contract. And so for about 2 weeks, basically we camped out. And that's as close as we ever came to a vacation. I said my pop never went on vacation when I was growing up.
Yeah.
He just worked. And to be up in the mountains in the sequoias and see those giant sequoia trees, being a little 11-year-old boy. And the highlight of the trip was when we left, we headed north. And we went north of Reno to a small town called Fallon, Nevada.
Fallon, Nevada.
And Fallon, Nevada is where my namesake lived. And Francis Allen, he said, lived in north of Reno and went to an Indian school when he was a young boy. And I got to meet my namesake, the man that I was named after. And
what an experience.
For being a little kid, I mean, so you were in the Marines with my pop? Yeah.
Wow.
And you fought at Saipan, Okinawa? Yes. It was something that affected me my whole life, So it was part being out in nature, and then when I became an adult, I made sure my kids, got out in nature. We'd go up the Kern River and
yes.
go up to Lake Tahoe, and being out in nature is my therapy. Always has been.
The free therapy, the
Yes.
nature therapy.
Yes.
Podcasting's my therapy.
Yeah.
And nature. So it works out for me too. There's a joke they say, like, women they see a therapist, and then men they start a podcast. I'm not gonna lie, a little true, you know. To bring it back to you mentioned you're in the sequoia forest. You give a big hug to those trees that were looming over you. Like that's a pretty special landscape.
No, but it was probably one of my first experiences of realizing what a small part we are in nature. We're a very small part. We're just a single thread of that web, you know. And when I saw those giant trees, I went, wow, these are really impressive. To see deer, you know, wherever you go out in the meadows, the deer they were all over. We saw deer and coyotes and some foxes and things like that, rabbits and all that. But when I became an adult, I took my kids back to Sequoia and we camped out. We rented one of the little cabins and camped out. And I went for a little hike with my son, and he was about 5 or 6 years old, if I remember correctly. And we're walking through this beautiful meadow, and all of a sudden we look, and maybe about 100 yards away was a mama bear and her cub. And I told my son, be quiet. We're going to walk backwards. And we walked backwards, got another 50, 60 yards
Yes.
away, and then turned and just walked away. But it was so cool to see this giant bear with her, you know, mama bear with her cub. And I knew, okay, mama bears are very protective.
Yes.
You know.
Wow, you got that experience.
Yeah,
So
it was really cool.
did it come closer to you, or did it just go on its own way with its cub?
It looked over at us, and we apparently we didn't pose any threat. So you know, she just kept on walking with a little cub, and I backed off and gave him, you know, more than enough room. And my son was very impressed that, you know, when we went back, he, you know, told his mom and his sister that we saw 2 bears.
Yeah, that's and they always warn you, like, if you see a mama bear with the cub, that's the one
Yeah.
scenario that you got to be extra cautious about. And what a core memory for your kid to have. How many kids do you have?
2,
2.
a daughter and a son.
And how old are they now?
My daughter is 51 and my son is 46.
Okay.
That shows you how old I am. I'm old.
No, it's you work out. You keep yourself youthful. I see you. I'm gonna put on these sunglasses because the
The
sun
sun's coming out.
is playing with me a bit. But you're in a good part because
I'm good,
You're
yes.
good. Okay, just making sure. I want to speak more about your native heritage. Could you share more about that, and what are your tribes most known for as well?
Well, as everyone can see, apparently the Chumash and Tataviam are extremely good-looking people, so we're famous for that.
You got style. You got
Yeah.
the shoes. I love the button shirt, the hair. I love it.
I tell people, as you saw in the family pictures, my dad was a Marine and fought in World War II. So, some of the most difficult battles of American history, my pop was in, and he raised all of us to be proud of our Indian heritage. And Indian was the word, the adjective that was used back then. It wasn't offensive. It was the term that was used for Native peoples in America at that time in the 50s and 60s. So I grew up knowing that I'm an Indian, and that's what I grew up as. It's fascinating in that my father dropped out of high school. My mother dropped out of high school. You know, they were just hardworking, working class people. That's who I come from, both sides of my family. But there were certain things that my pop was ahead of his times on, and one of them was many tribal people in the 40s and 50s and 60s. They were trying to hide their tribal ancestry.
Oh, they felt ashamed.
Because we were such a small minority, and you know, when you're labeled a savage, you know, it's not something. And because of my pop, me and my brothers and sisters, we had a completely different attitude. When my mom's side of the family, my aunts and uncles on my mom's side of the family, every now and then, you know, being a mischievous little boy, you know, they go, "Alan, you're like a wild Indian." And they would say it to try and put me in my place or try and hurt my feelings. And I took it as a compliment, like, yes,
that.
yes, I am. And that's what I'm trying to be. I share this picture all the time. People ask me, Alan, when did you get involved with your tribal culture? Because a lot of tribal people, especially in California, they're in their 40s and 50s, and they go, okay, now I'm going to research my tribal history.
Oh, like later in their life.
Later in their life. I did it just the opposite. I knew my tribal ancestry from the day I was born, and I became a native activist when this picture was taken.
Yo, the hair.
So this is me right here. This cute little 6-year-old boy with a mohawk haircut, and it was the summer of 1957, and me and my older brother wanted to get mohawk haircuts, and we asked our pop if we can get mohawk haircuts, and he'd go, yeah, okay, come on. Took us down to the barber shop, got the mohawk haircuts. My pop got in the barber's chair. The barber says, take a little off the side, turn to the back. He goes, no, give me a mohawk.
Wow.
Now, at this time in 1957, this is very unique, and this is where I mean my father was ahead of his times in certain things. When we got those mohawk haircuts, Hanford had about 10,000 people. It was a very small town. And everybody knew who we were before we got the mohawk haircuts because my father identified as Indian. And he didn't try and hide it. He got in a few scrapes and a few fights and bars,
Really?
Because someone didn't, would make some derogatory remark about it, savage Indian or something like that, or, do something mocking, and the fight was on. And so when we walked out of that barber shop, everybody knew who we were already. But when we walked out of that barber shop, what we were doing was we were giving everyone in Hanford the middle finger. Like,
Yes.
this is who we are. We're Indians, and we're proud of it. We're not going to hide it. Not only are we not going to hide it, we're going to put it in your face.
Yes.
And if you don't like it, we can go aside and settle this like men. That was my pop's philosophy. We had to go bail Pop out of jail a few times on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, getting in a little bar scrape, and usually it was over his Indian heritage.
Wow, you are a descendant of quite. Your father is quite the man. He stood on business. He wasn't afraid. He embraced his native heritage, despite what you mentioned. A lot of people in the community, if they were of native ancestry, suppressing it.
Yeah.
That's really difficult to do. To stand out and be proud.
I'll give you an example of how difficult it was. It wasn't an easy road to travel. On my birth certificate, it says Indian. My father, Abel Salazar, Indian. On my sister, same thing. On my older brother, the same thing. On my sister Glenda, who only lived 3 days, on her birth certificate said the same thing. On my younger brother, same thing. That was very unusual. What it means is my father he'd go to the hospital when we were born. He would search out the person that's filling out the birth certificate and tell them, this is what I want you to put on it. And that was very unusual for that time.
Wow.
And I'll give you an example. My grandmother, Vera Ortega Salazar, was darker than me. She was a very dark woman. And on her birth certificate, it says Caucasian, which means whoever filled out the birth certificate never went and asked her parents, my great-grandparents, Antonio, what they wanted.
Oh, they never got asked.
They probably never got asked. And back in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, well until even sometimes depending on what state you were at in the South, they only had two choices. You were either Caucasian or Negro.
Negro.
That was the phrase. That was the choices. They didn't acknowledge all these Italian Americans, Mexican American, Native American, African American. They didn't have all that back in the 40s and 50s. So for my pop to do that was before civil rights. That was before AIM.
Wow.
That was before Martin Luther King. That was my sister was born in 42. That was a bold thing to do.
That's extremely bold. If it was pre-civil rights.
Yeah. Well, and the story is on the Mohawks. I didn't know this until I was older. My sister told me the whole story. When we got the Mohawks, we went to Mass the next Sunday, and we waited till Mass started, and then Pop sent me down the center row to find us a seat right in the front, so the Padre would have to look at the Salazar boys with Mohawk haircuts. and nice Western shirts and blue Levi's on, because apparently a couple weeks prior to that, the Padre had pulled my father aside and said, Abel, my male parishioners usually wear a suit when they come to Mass, or at least a nice dress shirt, dress pants, and dress shoes. I said, my father worked in construction his whole life. He worked with these his whole life. And we had horses. So when we went to Mass, we were good Catholics. We went to Mass every Sunday. Although I confess, I only went to Mass because I knew I was going to get pancakes or waffles afterward as long as I behaved.
Hey, it's okay. Those incentives are.
Yeah. But the Padre told my father, our male parishioners usually wear nice dress pants and dress shoes and a tie, shirt and tie. And my father didn't own a suit, he didn't own a tie, he didn't own any nice dress shoes. That's why he wore his good blue Levi's, not his old ones, and his good cowboy boots and a nice Western shirt. That was it. So when we got the Mohawk haircuts, we sat in the front row. My sister said you could see smoke coming out of the Padre's ears because my pop didn't have on a suit, he didn't have on a shirt and a tie, he had on his Western shirt with a Mohawk haircut, sitting in the front row.
Front row seat.
Yeah, so that's how I was raised, to be proud of my tribal heritage. Don't go looking for fights, but don't run away from them. That's how I was raised.
What a powerful story. What a story and a statement. Walking down the middle of the aisle,
Yeah.
right in the front.
Yeah.
Curious, when you got your mohawk and you saw yourself in the mirror, what did you think? Like immediately, what were those thoughts and feelings like when you saw yourself in that reflection, having a mohawk like your dad?
Well, it was probably the last time I was cool. I tell people all the time, and people in their late 60s and 70s, they know what I'm talking about. So in the 50s and early 60s, the only tribal people we saw on television were on shows about frontiersmen going from the East Coast and going through wild land to settle in Kentucky and to settle in the West and in Oklahoma, and the Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett shows. Those were the only shows and Western movies that we would see Indians on. And lots of times the Indians were always portrayed as wild, savage warriors. And like I said, as a little boy, I go, oh, that's what I want to be. And actually, I would imagine, I know how me and my older brother were back then. Like I said, we were rambunctious little boys. We probably wanted tomahawks also, but we couldn't probably talk Pop into letting us have the tomahawks. That wouldn't be a good idea.
That's extra bold.
Yes.
Because you have that's like almost like a foot high, right? A tomahawk?
Yeah. But my pop carried on a traditional tribal tradition, and I'm not even sure how aware of it he was. But we learned how to hunt at a very early age. But we used, and I still have it. I have an old 22 pump rifle that I learned to hunt when I was 9, 10 years old. And when I believe I was 10, I might have been 11, for Christmas I got a hunting knife. The blade was about that long, a nice long blade with a nice wooden handle. And I remember my Aunt Mary Jean, my Uncle Joe, my mom's sister and brother-in-law, they thought my dad was crazy. Like, you're giving that little boy a hunting knife? But as you can see, I still have all 10 fingers.
Yes.
Because he said, this isn't a toy. This is a tool. And this is how you use it. And he showed me how to use it. If you're making something with wood, you don't do it this way. You do it that way.
Yeah.
I knew how to skin and gut a rabbit by the time I was 10 years old. So mostly what we hunted in the country, there was jackrabbits and cottontails.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what did you hunt? Yeah, okay.
So I did, as a young boy, I did a lot of rabbit hunting with not a bow and arrow, but with my trusty 22 pump rifle.
That sounds like an exhilarating chase
Yeah.
to find them and go hunting.
And I actually stopped hunting when I was 18 years old. I haven't gone hunting as an adult. And I remember this vividly. I was 18 years old. We were almost ready to graduate from high school. And me, about 4 friends, jumped in a 63 Chevy We all had our 22 rifles, and we were going to go rabbit hunting.
What a sight
And
that
we
must
were in
have been.
Bakersfield, and we're driving down this country road, and there's orange grove, and down each row we're driving real slow looking. All of a sudden we see a jackrabbit, and we all jump out of the car. I had a pump, which means you pump it, click, pump, click, but and they all had automatics. Just hold the trigger,
Oh, wow.
as fast as you can do the trigger. We shot 50 rounds at that jackrabbit, and none of us hit it.
Oh my goodness, really?
I go, we are pathetic. My ancestors are looking down at me in shame right now.
You wasted all that?
And I'm pretty sure that jackrabbit, like he did this, and then he ran up and stayed right in the row where we could see him, and he stopped and looked at us, and I almost felt he had that look on his face like, you guys are the worst hunters I've ever seen.
Yeah, he was like, you all suck. I'm
Yeah,
still here
yeah.
prancing around.
But fortunately for us as teenage boys in the late 60s, we just said, oh, the hell with it. We drove over to McDonald's, and for $1, you could get like 3 hamburgers, 2 fries, and a large soda pop for $1.
The good old McDonald days.
Yes.
Yeah, that's funny. No need to hunt anymore. Just pull up to the fast food chain.
I tell people all the time, my Tataviam, Chumash, most California tribal people are hunters, gatherers, and business people. Business people because we traded extensively, and we still are hunters and gatherers. Most of us do our hunting and gathering at Whole Foods and Vaughn's now.
Oh
It's
my
much
goodness.
easier.
I love that joke. That was actually my next question I wanted to segue into, because you are of Chumash and Tataviam ancestry. I was going to ask you, like, what are your tribes most known for? And you just
Yes.
mentioned hunters and gatherers, if you could keep expanding for each tribe.
Yeah. Well, the Chumash are one of the largest tribes in California, one of the oldest tribes probably in the United States.
One of the oldest in the U.S.?
The oldest human remains are the leg bones, the 2 long leg bones of a Chumash man that was found on Santa Rosa Island.
Okay.
And when they did carbon dating testing on the Arlington Spring man, it was determined that those leg bones were between 13,000 to 13,500 years old. And as of even today, February 14th, 2025, those are still the oldest human remains found in North America.
Really?
So
That's
the Chumash,
fascinating.
one of the things we're famous for is we're one of the oldest tribes in North America, and we can prove it. But our canoes are very unique. Our shell bead money that we traded, those little small shell beads that have been found in village sites by archaeologists, hundreds and hundreds of miles away. They have found Chumash shell beads in Arizona and New Mexico, Dene, Hope, Pueblo village sites. Over 900 miles away, ocean shell beads made by the Chumash from here have been found 900 miles away in the desert out in Arizona and New Mexico.
These aren't abalone
No,
shells,
no.
right?
The shell beads were made out of they're very small shells. They're about that big. They're ovella shells.
Ovella shells.
So they're like a snail shell, kind of wrap around. So I'm pretty sure what made them valuable was, and one thing that all of my tribal ancestors were well known for, is we had really highly skilled craftsmen. So to make a small circular disc, that big around with a hole right in the center from a shell that big that you can take with your hands and break, they were very delicate. So that's what made them valuable. It's kind of hard for American people to understand. Like, well, these shells are much bigger and they're really pretty because they have all these colors. Why didn't you make them from this? Well, we did make them also from this, but the craftsmanship to make something from such a small shell was admired. Americans, we like big. The trash can cars that Tesla makes, big.
Food portions, big.
Hummers, big. SUVs. The tribal people were not that impressed with that stuff.
I remember I heard in I think it was a video or maybe it was another podcast you were on, you referred to these, the abalone shells and maybe the other shells you mentioned as Chumash bling bling.
Yes.
I laughed out loud when I heard that. I was like, he's with the times.
Yes. And I go to schools all the time, and I'll take small shells like these, this size, and I'll tell kids, this is the perfect size to make a necklace. So I'll bring everything so you can make yourself a necklace. But invariably, I also have some shells this size, and the kids, there's always kids that they go, oh, this one's bigger. I go, yeah, but are you like that rapper that has the big clock on? I mean, I got some abalone shells that big, but I'm not going to make a necklace out of it.
Yeah, just a gaudy
Yes.
abalone shell, just like a big wrapper chain,
yeah.
just to make a statement of your value. That is so funny. And the Tataviam ancestry, I think there's some overlap, right, with
Yeah.
what both tribes are known for, right?
It's really fascinating. And I've been saying this for the last couple of years. When you look at where we're at in America today, the Tataviam, at best, at their peak, so at 1750, before the missions came, they think there might have been about 3,000 Tataviam people. There were 30,000 Chumash. We were outnumbered 10 to 1 by our neighbors. And we traded extensively. So why didn't people have disputes all the time? How did the Tataviam survive? How did they not get wiped out by the Chumash? The Tongva Gabrielino, the Gabrielino Keech were twice, 3 times as many as them, as the Tataviam. So literally, the Tataviam, this one small tribe that my ancestors come from, we were outnumbered by larger tribes, and this is how we survived. And it's the way the Chumash survived also. We formed coalitions. So Shishalope is where we are at today. Shishalope is where Ventura is. So the fairgrounds going towards the beach, this would be the edge of Shishalope, right here where we're at. It had coalitions with villages on the islands. So if we needed shell bead money or abalone shells, they had them by the millions out there, more than they could use. They couldn't make enough shell bead money. They couldn't make enough abalone fishing hooks. They had so many.
I like that. That's really cool.
So they formed coalitions with these tribes because they had deer meat, deer hides, no deer on the islands. That coalition helped. They would, things that my Chumash ancestors had in abundance, would trade with the Chumash on the islands. But the Tataviam did that too with just neighboring villages. So our villages were only 40 or 50 people. One, you're related to everybody in the village, so if you want to find a mate, you have to go outside your village. So the Tataviam survived because they formed coalitions where these 3 or 4 villages would work together. And sometimes the villages were close by, sometimes they were 40, 50 miles away. They would form a coalition. A lot of the tribes in what is now the San Fernando Valley had coalitions with tribal people on San Clemente Island, Santa Barbara Island, even
as far as San Clemente, like San Diego area?
The San Clemente, the San Clemente Island is off of Los Angeles, the coast of Los Angeles. So it's part of the southern Channel Islands.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So coalitions they could be your neighboring tribe 2 or 3 miles away. They could be a tribe 30 or 40 miles away that has resources that you don't have, or maybe they have more in abundance. So you form coalitions to help you survive. We've gotten away from that in America. We've gotten away from forming coalitions, and we need to start doing that again. That's how we're going to survive. We're only going to survive as a nation if we don't start forming coalitions again.
They're very strategic people. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
How they survived despite being this small tribe, but mighty, resourceful, and strategic.
Yeah. So basically, my belief is when you look at the Tataviam, we were probably the middleman. So the next tribe east of the Tataviam are the Serrano. They're out in the desert. You know, Palmdale, Lancaster, going out towards Barstow. That's out in the middle of the desert. Well, the Chumash people, were they capable of sending runners from Shishalope here out to the desert 100 miles away? Yes, we had great runners. We could have done that.
Fast runner.
Yeah. But it's much easier to go, well, let's just go 40 miles inland to Goyanga, trade with the Tataviam, and they'll trade with the Serrano.
Exactly.
And then what they take from us, that they trade to the Serrano, they'll get things from the desert that they have in abundance that the Chumash could use. So my theory is, I think one of the ways this small tribe, the Tataviam, survived was we were the middlemen lots of times. When you look at where we were at, we were in the middle of a lot of big tribes and a lot of tribes that had some really big resources.
That makes a lot of sense. And could you just quickly break down for the listeners, like the local tribes, where were they predominantly located? Like I know Chumash is typically along the coast, like Central Coast, over here in Ventura, the Ventura Coast, and the Gabriela Tongva more inland, and then Tataviam's more inland too as well.
Yes,
Could you kind of break that down real quick?
Yeah. So simply put, the Tataviam are northern Los Angeles County.
Okay.
So from about San Fernando, the town of San Fernando, going north, the Santa Clarita Valley was probably the center where the majority of our villages were, but we went into the mountains north up to about Gorman, and then out towards the desert, Agua Dulce, Lancaster,
yes.
Palmdale.
Where Vasquez Rocks is,
yes,
yeah.
That was Tataviam territory. You go south of Tataviam territory, you're in the Gabrielino, Tongva, Keech territory, basically the Los Angeles basin.
Correct.
So the center part of Los Angeles County down to the southern part of Los Angeles County. The Chumash go from Paso Robles, Morro Bay, that Central Coast area, all the ways down to Malibu. So they had, besides one of the most beautiful areas to live in, the resources were just tremendous. So besides coalitions, in my humble opinion, every time an animal goes extinct, you and I are that much closer to extinction too. So there has been a real push to revitalize tribal cultures. And I don't believe you can revitalize tribal cultures without revitalizing the wild animal population, the native animals that lived here, that are either close to extinction or they're extinct from California, and revitalization of our native plants. So when the Europeans came, when the Spanish came, when the Americans came, they hunted large predators. They hunted us and almost killed all of us. They hunted mountain lions, bears, wolves. So our grizzly bears are gone. Our wolves are coming back.
I saw that, yeah.
But 20 years ago, there were no wolves in California, and we used to have a tremendous wolf population. Our mountain lion population is dangerously close to being on the extinct, danger of extinction list. So there are people that want to try and build bridges to help the animals, to help mountain lions. There are people that want to bring back the wolves, and they've started coming back. There's a push, my understanding, from environmentalists, earth scientists, botanists, biologists, to try and bring back grizzly bears to California.
No way.
More we revitalize our native plants. So where we are at right now, this beautiful museum, the Mission right across the street. But the 101 highway, the fairgrounds, all of Ventura, this beautiful town right here, when it was built, they cut down native plants. They cut down native oaks by the thousands.
Native oaks too, wow.
Native oak trees were removed. I can guarantee you there were a dozen oak trees right here where this museum and museum grounds are at, museum and Mission, that were cut down used for firewood, but basically cut down so they could build the town of Ventura. That happened throughout all of California. We need to revitalize our native plants. They are much more fire resistant, don't cause as big as fires. I mean, eucalyptus trees, they're like tiki torches.
So
Boom,
flammable.
they just go
Yeah.
up. These palm trees right here, they're like torches. They just go up like that. Whereas the native plants, they're built to come back after fires, and oak trees are almost fire resistant.
I think you'll appreciate this. So a few weeks ago, I think it was Martin Luther King weekend, I joined the National Park Service and Samo Fund for the native plant restoration in the Rancho Sierra Sadwiwa area. And that was my first time ever doing something like that. And it was so educational, actually really fun too. And
Yeah.
it was, we made seed bombs, and then we were on the hillsides, and I think we were planting, I can't remember all the names, but one was like purple needle grass, and there's like a few other ones. And so I'm so happy that you brought up the restoration of native plants. Like you mentioned, like what we just experienced in LA, that's a big topic of conversation, is like a lot of our native shrubs or native plants have been gone for like decades because fire's not supposed to happen as frequently as it has, because Southern California is like actually it's a fire region, but
Yes.
the more of these fires keep coming more frequently, these native plants, native shrubs don't have time to actually grow back.
Yeah. I had a motive for bringing that up. One, I don't think most Californians realize what happened to native peoples. So we were enslaved at the missions. We were forced to work from sunrise to sunset. Once you were the age of 10, you were treated as an adult. If I lived at a mission today, they could care less if I was 74 years old. I'd still have to work from sunrise to sunset, which is going to shorten my lifespan. If you're 10 years old and you're forced to work as like an adult, it's going to shorten your lifespan. So many of our kids and elders didn't survive the mission period because they were overworked. They were literally worked to death. And then after the mission period, California had an official state policy of they were going to exterminate all California Indians. So there was the bounty system that paid California citizens to kill my ancestors. They would pay bounties.
I can't believe there's a bounty system.
So, and most people don't know that, but what you don't, like I said, but most people don't tie them all together, is that when the missions came, the Ventura mission, the San Fernando mission, every mission in California brought thousands and thousands. I'm not talking 2,000 or 3,000, 10,000 head of cattle. Each mission would have 10,000 head of cattle.
I see where this is going.
So when they set those cattle out to do free range, to graze wherever they wanted, the Catholic Church today, and this still upsets me, the Catholic Church today says that most California Indians died from diseases that they couldn't fight off. They'd never been exposed to chickenpox and mumps and different strains of just the flu and things like that. And they don't mention that how hard we were forced to work, and that weakened our immune system. The same thing happened to all the animals. Our deer population, our Thule elk population almost went extinct because all those livestock, all those thousands and thousands of sheep that every mission had, 10,000 head of cattle, 3,000 horses, they brought diseases that the native animals had never been exposed to. So there was epidemics within our native animal population, our animal relatives, and there was epidemics within our native plant. Plus just being removed for agriculture and to build. So those three are connected. And here's my motive for bringing this up. I have a cousin that is the manager of a native plant nursery for the wildlife bridge they're building in Agora, the Wallace Annenberg Wildlife Bridge.
Yeah, I just drove by that actually on my way here.
It's really spectacular. They're going to revitalize on both sides of the bridge, so not just what they're going to plant on the bridge. They're going to plant 100 acres north of the bridge and 100 acres south of the bridge, native plants that are propagated from just right around there. the oak trees from just getting the acorns just from the oak trees there. And my cousin and I are starting a nonprofit, Native Roots with a Z.
Love that.
And we're going to start some native nurseries. And our goal isn't to start a native-owned native plant nursery. We want to start native plant nurseries and have one here in Ventura, have one in Agora, have one in Santa Clarita. We were meeting with some people that are organizing for the Sepulveda Basin, which is thousands of acres of open space land, and we're negotiating with them to have a native nursery in the Sepulveda Basin for the general public to come and buy native plants. And if I could scold Californians and Americans, stop planting palm trees.
Yes.
Please start planting valley oak, coast live oak, scrub oak. We need to bring our oak tree population back. It provides so much for all the animals, the woodpeckers, the blue jays, the deer eat the acorns, even the bears eat the acorns. They're a major link in that chain that has been broken. We need to reconnect that chain again.
And when you have your nonprofit up and running, please let me know how we can help support that when you do the native plant nursery and restoration efforts. Would love to volunteer or activate our community to help in whatever way we can.
We'll be making announcements in the next month or two. We've already started the process of filing to be a 501c nonprofit.
Amazing.
And there's people already coming out of the woodwork to support us. So we'll definitely reach out to you. We need everyone's support.
Exclusive news right here on the Just Right podcast. You heard it first. And what have we been speaking about? You've been alluding to the types of work you do, and you are a Native American activist. Can you share more about the types of projects and work you do for the tribal communities and also beyond? I know you've touched upon that briefly, but if you could share more about the kind of work that you do?
Well, like I said, when I got that mohawk at age 6, I consider that's when my activism started. When we left Hanford, we moved to Bakersfield, and I lived in Bakersfield for 30 years. And don't hold that against me. Don't think less of me because I lived in Bakersfield. Like I tell everyone, I didn't choose to go to Bakersfield. I was only 13 years old. There was a lot of construction work, and Pop said, "We're moving to Bakersfield." I said, "Oh, okay."
One of my best friends lives in Bakersfield.
It's a great town. Like my kids still live there. I accomplished a lot while I was there, and it was one of my first Native American organizations that I got involved with was the Indian Health. So Indian Health is a big thing. There's American Indian health clinics throughout all of America, and they're very important because they provide health services for urban Indians. So Los Angeles has the largest Native population of any city in America. So Southern California, there's more Native people, and Native people from all over America and Canada, because there's just so much work in Los Angeles. It's such a big town. But like I said, they're urban Indians. So these Indian health clinics have been set up to help urban Indians that don't have reservation land. We're on the unceded land of the Ventureno Chumash. They're not federally recognized, So there's Indian health clinics in Santa Barbara and Carpinteria, and there used to be one here in Ventura. I don't think we have one anymore. So those are some of the activist causes that I got involved with. But for the last 25, almost 30 years, the 2 or 3 areas I've focused on the most is the storytelling, which is basically revitalization of tribal cultures, because storytelling is not just an art. It's like I said, it's educational, it's entertainment and educational at the same time. So I hope to inspire young people to become storytellers. And I don't care what tribe you're from. My English ancestors were great storytellers. My Portuguese ancestors were great storytellers and told a great story and traveled all around the world in ships and boats. So storytelling is very important, and I hope young people buy the books, and I'll tell everyone, when I was at the fourth grade, and they had Chumash stories there for all the fourth graders to read. And what I encouraged them to do was learn the story so you can tell it. So you don't need to read it. Just know the what the story is about, the beginning, the middle, and then tell it in your own words. Tell a good story. And then the other thing is our canoes, our tomals, our ocean canoes. As you said, the Chumash, most of our villages were along the coast. We're ocean people. We had villages on all the islands, and we built our canoes to go out to the islands as transports, to fish, to take trade items, like I said, out to the islands. So the Chumash, probably the largest part of the Chumash culture is the maritime culture. And to be part of a small group of Chumash people, when we started in 1997, there was less than 50 of us that were actually kind of involved in trying to build these canoes, trying to learn how to paddle in them, learn how to navigate. We had no captains in 1997, zero. We had no captains. Now we have 5 or 6 really good captains that know how to navigate, know the ocean. We're starting to build. We'll start tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Tomorrow we'll be working just down the road, 2 blocks down the road, 50 West Main Street. And we're going to start building, we hope, 2 tomals.
Do people watch like you guys building it, or is it just more of a private thing? Or
No. I mean, we have limited space, so it's not like we can have 100 people come down. But guests are more than welcome to come on down. I always like when people come down to visit to see what we're doing, because I'm kind of the lead person. So I'll just go, Justin, Piyoko, Joseph, you guys keep working. I'm going to give these people a little tour. So I get a break from hammering and sawing and cutting.
Smart.
And I go, let me show you what we're doing. I take them over here and explain this, and what we're doing here, and how we're making our paddles and everything. And the ones that are working look at me like, how long is Alan going to talk? Until we're almost done.
By the time you come back, your team is already finished.
We're cleaning it up now. Oh, darn.
That's so cool, because this is how I first got familiar with you. It was that Patagonia film, and I was just so infatuated with that story. It was just so unique and so special that you were focusing specifically on this part of your ancestry, your culture, the Chumash traditional plank canoe.
Yeah.
What makes this canoe like different than like other boats or like kayaks or other canoes?
Yeah, plank canoes for California are unique. There's only 2 tribes, the Chumash and our neighbors to the south, the Gabrielino Tongva, Gabrielino Keech, made plank canoes. So basically, we take boards and glue and tie them together, board on top of board. They're flat bottom. So being flat bottom, they're very tippy. So this is the one that we've been paddling in the most for the last 12, 14 years or so. It's 32-foot plank canoe. You can see the black is the joint between the canoes. So there's not one single metal nail or one single metal screw in this canoe. It is literally glued and tied together. Now, yes, we use, circular saws and grinders and power sanders and modern tools, but they're made with the same design that my Chumash ancestors made them 1,000 years ago. So flat bottom canoes are very tippy. They rock back and forth, but they can carry a lot of weight. So this canoe right here is 32 feet long. We put 600 pounds of sandbags in the bottom to get about, so if the canoe has no weight, it'll sit on top of the water. It'll rock back and forth. But if you put some weight in it and you get about 6-8 inches underwater, then it stabilizes and only rocks a little bit. So they were built to carry 400, 500, 600 pounds of trade items, to go out and catch not 30 or 40 fish just for a couple families to eat. No, we'd send our canoes out and they would get enough fish, 300, 400 pounds of fish, and they're going to feed the whole village.
300, 400 pounds of fish?
Oh yes, easily. Yeah.
That is an absurd amount of fish.
And what's fascinating is this. Let me throw some numbers out there that, to me, they're very impressive, and it shows you the importance of what we're trying to do here. There's the local Chumash, Ventureno Chumash community. These numbers will tell you how important it is of what we're doing. We're pretty sure some of the last traditional tamols, plank canoes, were built right here at the Ventura Mission, somewhere in the 1820s, 1830s. There might have been a few other, Santa Barbara Mission built quite a few also. So the last few tamols, traditional plank canoes, were built at the Santa Barbara Mission and the Ventura Mission. They were used for that purpose of going out and getting 300-400 pounds of fish and then feeding everyone at the mission, going out, every day for a month and getting enough fish so they could dry fish and have enough food to feed everyone through the whole winter. And then by the 1830s, definitely by the 1840s, we stopped building the plank canoes. None were built. So the ones we've built in modern day, 1912, 1976, the Halleck at the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History, the ones that we built in 1997, they were all built in Santa Barbara. So we haven't revitalized our canoe culture here in Ventura. That's why I'm excited we're going to start tomorrow. We'll start on building the first bottom boards, and we put our support posts down first, and we'll hopefully, knock on wood, we'll start that this weekend, tomorrow or Sunday. It will be at least 180 years since a traditional plank tamole was built in Ventura. So this is an historic an event, revitalizing a part of the Chumash culture that has been dormant, that has been in hibernation like the bear, but not just for the winter, for 180 years. So it's important work. And I'm honored just to be, I do about that much. It's non-Chumash people like Peter Holworth, who's a master carpenter, master canoe builder that's helping us. Patagonia, who has supported us financially. And also some of their employees have come and worked and will come and work. I guarantee you within the next 3 to 4 months, there's going to be some Patagonia people there helping us saw and grind and glue and tie them together. But the Chumash community, other tribal people that just live in Ventura, everyone's welcome. Everyone's welcome.
And your tribe is known for so many different things. Like, how did you get attracted to building canoes in the first place? Like, that's very particular within.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because, like I said, I grew up in Hanford, California, in Bakersfield, San Fernando. I would go hiking in the mountains. That was my thing. I wasn't an ocean person, and in the fall of 1997, we put Eliwayun, which is swordfish. Eliwayun is a 24-foot plank flat bottom canoe, and we put her in the water for the first time Thanksgiving weekend, 1997. I remember it like it was yesterday.
1997.
And I was in that first crew. They go, okay, Alan, you're in seat number 1. You're going to set the pace. I can do that.
You were seat number 1?
Yeah.
That's an honor.
And we paddled it in the Santa Barbara Harbor. We went a little bit outside the harbor. And I tell people all the time, by no means am I an adrenaline junkie. The only thing that I'm an adrenaline junkie on is I love the race. So if my ankles were better, I'd be out running 100-meter races right now. Kids, 10 years old, 12 years old, I could care less if I get beat. I'd be racing my grandson right now. He'd smoke me, but I love the race. That's the only thing I'm adrenaline junkie on. Everything else, I drive real slow on the highway. I have a fear of heights, and when I got in the tamal, it felt perfectly natural.
Wow.
That was 1997. 4 years later, 2001, we were leaving Channel Islands Harbor at 3:45 in the morning.
Oh yeah, this is the story. Okay, I want to talk
Yes.
about this. This is the story that I really wanted to highlight. This 2001 canoe expedition
Yes.
to Channel Islands.
It was an historic event. We're pretty sure that no traditional Chumash tamol had gone from anywhere on our coast out to any of the islands in over 150 years, probably more like 160 years. And 2001, we thought we were ready. We'd practiced, we'd done crew changes, we'd done some long paddles from Santa Barbara to Carpinteria,
Okay.
and we decided that we were going to leave around 3 o'clock in the morning, because the ocean is the calmest early morning. Late at night, the ocean calms down, the winds usually calm down, and by the time we did ceremony, blessings and everything, it was 3:45, and we were leaving the Channel Islands Harbor in Oxnard. Once again, I was in the number 1 seat. When we got out of the harbor, we sent our support boat. We go about 2 miles ahead of us. We want to paddle in open water. And when we got out of the harbor, we were all a little taken aback, kind of shocked by how dark it was. It was overcast.
That's right.
There was no moon. There was no stars. It was pitch black dark. And we realized, oh, we forgot to practice for this.
Oh, wow.
So it was literally the first time that those 5 men had ever paddled a canoe out in the middle of the ocean in complete darkness.
That's intense.
And like I said, I didn't think about it until actually maybe a year later when we were putting the video together. I go, I should have been scared. Should have at least had a little,
Yeah.
trepidation. Nothing. It felt perfectly natural.
You felt it.
When I'm in the canoe, even last year, like I said, I was 73 last year. You think, okay, pretty old. Getting in and out of the canoe is not easy. Paddling on your knees because our canoes are so deep. We're actually on our knees. Our paddles are 11 feet long. It takes a lot of upper body strength. I just so look forward to being on the water in a traditional canoe. It's just invigorating.
That first crossing you mentioned in
Yeah.
2001, so you're paddling out in the darkness, not realizing that you didn't actually prepare for this.
Yeah.
So did you have to turn around, or did you get to complete the crossing all the way to Channel Islands? Or
It was one of the most difficult crossings we've had. We've made 15, and technically, it's either 15 or 16. Whatever it is, it's really only a half. If we've gone 15 times, it's 14 and a half. Because in 2012, we got about 8 miles out, and we swamped it. A big wave came and hit it on the side and filled it up with water, and we didn't make it. So actually, whatever it is, it's 14 and a half or 15 and a half. But the first crossing was very difficult. The winds picked up, the swells were really big. We were taking water over the sides. Our sand was wet, and we made a mistake, whereas we went over to Anacapa because we wanted to take some photos and get some video footage of us paddling by Anacapa. When we got between Anacapa and Santa Cruz, it was already like 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. The winds had picked up, the swells it was some really difficult paddling. At one point, and I was in, because we have radios, two-way radios, and I asked our Captain Perry to radio the support boat and ask him how far have we gone in the last 30 minutes. We usually average around 2 to 3 miles an hour. So in 30 minutes, we should have gone a mile and a half. I don't think we'd gone anywhere. I think we were treading water. Because they said, you've gone about a half a mile. And I think they were just saying that to try and make us feel good.
Sure, yeah.
So one thing that I'm well known for, when I'm in the number 1 seat, I have a sprinter's mentality. I'm a sprinter at heart. So I tell whoever's sitting behind me. So last year, there were times in practices I'd be in the number 1 seat, and I'd turn to someone that's 18 years old. I go, tell me to slow down, because I speed up and I don't even know it. I start like this, and before I know it, and I'm paddling as fast and as hard as I can.
Autopilot.
I want to go fast. I want to paddle as hard as I can. That's why I just love it. It's physically demanding. It's exhilarating. So I always tell the person, I don't care if you're 18 years old. I don't care if you're 15 years old. And yes, I'm a tribal elder. It's okay for you to tell me, Alan, slow down. And I'll bring it back down to a reasonable pace, because we're going to paddle for 3 hours. We're going to paddle for 2 hours.
I was going to ask you, that journey from the mainland And doing this canoe crossing to Channel Islands, around how many hours does it take to get to
This
the
last year,
island?
it was beautiful conditions, hardly any wind, and we made a lot of crew changes because we had a lot of young paddlers, and we were able to get a lot of our young paddlers in. It was a very successful crossing. We went August 12th, 2024. We made it in 6 hours. And if we were to leave our good paddlers in it and just make 2 crew changes, in good conditions, we can make it in under 6 hours. Average conditions, 8 hours. Rough conditions, 10 to 12 hours. So in 2001, it took us almost 12 hours. But we paddled an extra 4 or 5 miles easily.
And how many miles is that channel? This is the Santa Barbara channel, it's called.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and like I said, it depends on where you leave. So traditionally, we would paddle down the coast. So even if you were from a village of Sutun, which is Santa Barbara, they occasionally, if it was really nice and flat, and been nice and flat for a couple of days, they go, let's shoot out there. They were better paddlers than we are today. They were much better, much stronger, much faster. But lots of times in average conditions where the swells are 3 to 4 feet high, you're going to paddle down the coast. When you get down by where modern day Oxnard is, it's only 20 miles from there to the end of Limu.
I see.
Actually, a little bit less than 20 miles. So you do a little of this, because you're taking on waves, So from Channel Islands Harbor to Scorpion, where the boat launch is and Island Packers goes, it's 19.7, something like that. But for us, we usually paddle somewhere around 21 to 22 miles on a crossing. Now, we don't go over by Anacapa. That year, we probably went 25 miles in very rough conditions.
And that's a very majestic channel. It's full of so much marine life, I noticed.
Oh, yeah. We almost always, and I can remember, it would be very unusual, and we don't know why. I can only think of one crossing where we didn't have dolphins come around us. They always come with us. We've never seen any great white sharks. We saw a giant sunfish last year. I mean, it was like
That
7 feet long. They're massive, really strange looking fish. Google sunfish. They're really a cool looking fish. And they actually have a dorsal fin. I go, oh look, we're finally going to see a shark. And they go, no, Alan, it's a sunfish. And it went right by us.
Wow, sunfish.
It's really cool.
So dolphins, sunfish. Also, that's a channel that migratory whales come through very often too, right?
They haven't, for some reason, the whales haven't come over and checked us out. Well, they're there. We'll see the spouts off in the distance. After the first crossing, we've always added more support boats. This year we had 2 pretty good-sized boats, and then a couple smaller Zodiacs. So we have kind of a little fleet around us. I think that's what's keeping the whales away from us.
And that first crossing, I saw that your son was actually one of the paddlers. How old were you and your son at this time?
I was in my late 40s. My son was in his 20s. But even better, in 2023, my son came back and paddled with us again, and my grandson got to paddle.
No way.
3 generations of Salazars in the 2023 crossing. I paddled, my son paddled, and my grandson paddled.
These are once in a lifetime memories. And that first crossing with your son being a paddler.
Yeah.
What was that like to have your son on this inaugural spiritual crossing to the island of Limu, Santa Cruz Island? What were the emotions like?
Oh, it was, and like I said, I was raised by a Marine, but there's times that you just got to kind of, you're going to choke up a little bit, a little tear is going to come down the eye. That was one of them. Being there on the beach, and we always take group pictures, and to get a group picture in 2023 with my son and grandson, that's I've been lucky and blessed my whole life, and have got to do some incredible things. Being in that first crew and that first crossing and the first feat. That was an incredible experience, but to be on the boat and watch my son and grandson paddle, it was a special day.
And this was the most recent crossing or the
That
2023
was
crossing?
a year and a half ago, so 2023, August of 2023.
And when you land, when you complete the crossing and you land on the island of Lemus, Santa Cruz, is there like a reception, like
Oh, yeah,
when you're
yeah.
like about to dock the canoe, or like what does that even look like?
Yeah, it's a big rush, and I'm one of the few that I've paddled in all the crossings.
How many
So
crossings now for you?
I think it's been 15, and I've paddled in. If it's been 16, I've paddled in 16. I've paddled in all of them
Since
So-
2001.
Since 2001.
Wow.
I feel pretty good. I work out all year round, so I feel pretty confident that I'll be able to paddle this year. And then I'm at the age I'll just go year by year. I'll see how I feel when I'm 75. If I can paddle, if I'm physically able to paddle, and what I mean by paddle, paddle a crew. You know,
You're the healthiest 75-year-old, the
Yeah.
Chumash power.
I'm too stubborn and have too much pride that I'll I'll paddle as long as I can pull my weight. And if I'm in the Tamal and someone's having to paddle extra hard because I'm not pulling very much, that's when I'll retire. But right now I'm still pulling my weight. So knock on wood.
Knock on wood for sure.
I'm good for another year.
And why are these canoe crossings so important to you in the tribal community?
I was in my mid to late 40s when we started building them. So even then, I'm not doing this for me. And I tell our young paddlers, I go, look, I'll get out of the canoe anytime, and let any of you guys get in. Those 16, 17, 18, those 22-year-olds, those are the most important ones.
The future,
Because they're gonna carry it on. I'm at the end of my career. I mean, I started very late in life, so I knew I was doing it so that, and that's why when my grandson got in, I go, okay, I'm good now. Is he going to be a paddler? I don't know, but he knows how important it is, and we got some really good young people coming and helping us build the tamales. But the landing, leaving the dark water paddlers, that's the best paddling there is. Paddling when it's pitch black dark is incredible paddling. But the second best paddling is when you're coming in and there's 150 people on the beach, family, friends, supporters, NOAA people.
Wow.
But that first crossing, my aunt and uncle and a couple of my cousins were there. My son was part of it. To see tribal people that I've paddled with, the Barbareño Chumash community, the Samala, the Santa Ynez Chumash community there, that I have friends that I'll have for my whole life that I've gotten from paddling. So I'm lucky and blessed.
What month do you typically do these crossings? Is
We
it the same month?
we used to always do them in September. The last two crossings we've gone in August, and they
September,
haven't set a definite date, but the August ones, the last two, the water's been really nice and calm, so they'll probably go again in August.
I definitely want to be there, whether it's on the mainland watching you all depart or being at Limu Island to see the reception. I don't know if that's allowed or how it works, but I definitely would love to. That would be a really special to witness and experience.
And we
canoe
get
crossing.
asked all the time. People will, like a couple of weeks before, I'll run into people, and they go, "When's the crossing?" I go, "Oh, we're leaving in 2 Saturdays." They go, "Can we come down and see you off?" I go, "Yeah," and I go, they don't know what time we leave. They're thinking we're going to leave at 8 o'clock in the
Sure,
morning.
yeah.
They go, "What time do you leave?" We get up at 2, get the weather report. If the weather report's good, we leave at 3. So if you want to come down to Channel Island Harbor at 3 a.m., we're right behind the Channel Islands Maritime Museum. Anyone can come. Last year we actually had a few people.
It weeds out a lot of people when you have
Yeah,
to start.
but most people go, oh, okay, yeah, I'll try and make it. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, we're not going to see them.
my spirit will be there.
Yes, I'll be there in spirit.
For me, I go hiking all the time, especially when I do these more challenging hikes. I have to wake up at 1 or 2 and be at the trailhead by like 3 or 4. So I think I can make that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alan, for sharing. That was definitely like a topic and experience I wanted to like dive in with you on, and I feel like I could ask you like a million more questions about canoe crossings. But to segue into the next question, always on this show, I want for the Just Our community, the listeners, to discover new places that our guests have explored, or that places that they have done that have meaning to them, special meaning to them. So I'm curious to know, Alan, do you have any specific trails or maybe mountains in SoCal or the Central Coast that you love exploring or have a deep spiritual meaning for you that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, there's several. I think the hiking at Satwewa is some of the best hiking in Ventura County. There's several trails there. The one that goes all the ways to the ocean. That's a great hike.
The Sycamore
Yeah,
Canyon,
yeah.
right?
But the hike I recommend that everyone should take is kind of remote. And if you Google Mount Pinos, Pinos, Mount Pinos is the tallest mountain in Chumash territory. It's a sacred mountain. It's considered the center of our universe. We have summer solstice ceremony up there. We have for the last 30 summers. Around the summer solstice, Saturday, around as close as we can get to June 21st, June 22nd, we're going to be up there for a summer solstice. That is a great hike. Basically, the road that you get off at Fraser Park Mountain Road, ends up at Mount Pinos. If you Google Nordic Base Camp at Mount Pinos, you Google map it, and there's hiking trails all there. But when you get there, there's a big parking lot, and as you're pulling in on the left side, there's a trail that you can take all the way to the top of Mount Pinos. It's exactly 2 miles. It's a very wide trail because it's actually a fire road. So if there's a fire, Los Padres National Forest can get vehicles up there. So it's a 8-foot, 10-foot wide trail. It meanders around. The views are incredible. When you get up to the top of the mountain, the vegetation is completely different because it's so windy up there. It's spectacular. And it is a sacred mountain, so you can kind of feel that spiritual energy. I tell people, if you're having a difficult time in your life, emotionally, physically, go up to Mount Pinos and just sit up there and say some prayers. If you're having a good time in your life, you just got married, just had your firstborn child,
Go there too.
you just graduated from Cal Lutheran and with a master's degree, go up to Mount Pinos and go for a nice hike. It's quiet. It's pretty much today the way it was 10,000 years ago. It's spectacular. And then the final one that I really enjoy, and it's more urban, it's in Thousand Oaks, and that's the Oak Brook Chumash Museum. So if you Google Oak Brook Chumash Museum, what a lot of people don't realize, they think, oh, well, it's just a small museum. It's over 300 acres of land.
Oh, wow.
And there's several nice little short hikes that you can take. They have a little village that's about a half a mile back from the museum. It's a great museum. They do good work. They have Chumash people that have been involved with it on their board, board of directors. My aunt's been involved with it. My family's been involved with that museum. But like I said, it's not just a museum. It's 300 plus acres of trails and beautiful oak woodlands and riparian. There's a beautiful creek through there. Satwewa, Oak Brook, and Mount Pinos. Those are my top 3.
Wow. I still have yet to do Mount Pinos. I know all about it. And you said Oak Brook Museum. I've still yet to explore that and visit that museum as well. And I know Mount Pinos is in the Los Padres National Forest. And it's a high elevation peak, I think. It's like at around 8,000 or 9,000 feet.
8,800 feet, yes.
Crazy story. I think like 2 years ago, one of my hiking crewmates' friends, his dad actually got caught in a freak snowstorm in Mount Pinus, so it was all over the news. And I know that since it's a high elevation peak, it gets slammed by the snow, which makes it very precarious, but also magical if you have that kind of skill set. So I'm really excited to. That's next on the trek agenda: Mount Pinus and Oak Brook Museum, and then you mentioned Satwewa, the trails there. I've been doing that Boney Mountain Peak a few times. Have you been up there?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my God, that one is that's very challenging. That trail.
There's some good hikes, So it's a great thing about Southern California, but it's a great thing about Ventura County. The hiking here is just spectacular. There's great trails all over Ventura County. Flat trails if you just want to walk out a mile and turn around and walk a mile back. Trails, the Mount Pinos, I believe you're going to go about a good 1,000 feet elevation from the parking lot up. I mean, so thin air, because when you're at the top, it's 8,800 feet. So you're going to have to stop and catch your breath a few times on that one.
For sure, the high elevation makes you feel like you're alive, though, even though you're trying to catch your breath. Okay, thank you for sharing the Mount Pinos, Oak Brook Museum, the trails around Rancho Sierra. Yes, the Ventura County trails, as I've come to experience the past several years, top tier, much more remote, more peaceful. I feel like you can feel much more connected to nature and Mother Earth there.
Yeah.
And also on this show, I typically ask our guests, for like hiking hacks or outdoor tips and tricks. But since we do have a unique guest, you being a tribal elder and indigenous perspective, we'd love to ask you, what is some tribal wisdom or tribal tips that you can share with our community of outdoor enthusiasts that they can apply when they're out in nature, or maybe just in their everyday lives?
When I mentioned the coalitions, and that's how tribal people have survived for thousands of years. The other way we survived, and I've done this my whole life, is when you're out in nature, and I'm guilty of this, because I'm a runner, I'm always looking at what pace am I walking at. Am I walking at a 15-mile pace? And when you're hiking, because it's uneven ground and you're going up, your pace might be 18 minutes a mile. And I'm like, I need to pick it up so I can get a little bit better pace. Tribal people have survived because we're very observant. So we use the animals as teachers, and we use the plants as teachers. But in order to do that, that means you have to do this. And I encourage everyone, when they're on a hike, pick a spot as you're hiking, an oak tree or a boulder, or a nice little spot where the views are good, and say, this is where I'm going to stop for a few minutes. 10 minutes is even better, and just sit and listen and watch. Look for the small creatures, the bugs, the caterpillars, the lizards. Listen for the little small birds that are chirping. Listen to the wind. See how the trees move, and it's a healing moment. And then continue your hike. On your way back, have at least two spots where you're going to go, okay, I'm going to stop. For some people, a minute is all they can do. Then they got to go, But if you can do 10, 12 minutes, and just listen to the wind blow. It's really a healing moment. Psychiatrists and doctors who are much smarter than I am will tell you that if you go sit underneath an oak tree, that oak tree sends off an energy. Its roots are in the ground. It's sending off an energy, and that calmness. When I talk to people about spirituality, I'm not a big tree hugger, kumbaya type person. I'm a realist. I try not to get upset when things happen politically and they don't go the way I wish they would go, because I live by that old saying, when you see something, observe it and go, I can make a difference. I'm gonna do this, and this, and I'm gonna help revitalize our canoe culture. And then go, you know what? No matter what I do, I'm not going to be able to change this situation. And knowing when to walk away. Mm-hmm. And those moments in nature, they'll help you with that insight. So I said, doctors will tell you that nature has healing power. So I'm not going to tell you that if you see an eagle, this is what it means. If you see a rattlesnake, that's the spiritual meaning of seeing that. No, it just means that you're out in nature, you're out in their land. Watch them, learn from them. How do they survive? When I mentioned earlier about the bear, I don't believe that a bear can heal me if I have cancer. But any psychiatrist, any doctor will tell you the strongest muscle we have is our brain. And if you go in to chemotherapy with a negative attitude, you're not going to survive. You're going to die real fast. If you go in with a positive attitude, I'm going to fight this like a bear, because the bear is the biggest, strongest animal I know. It's not mystical. It's practical. That's how I use my spirituality, in more practical terms, more practical reasoning. How can this make me a better person?
Wow, you dropped some very powerful and insightful gems right now that I'm still processing myself, and I love your answers so much, because I think that's what I've been getting into the past 2 years, especially learning how to slow down, learning to be more observant, getting more into my naturalist kind of like journey in my outdoor transformation, observing the native plants, observing the local wildlife, instead of just doing the trail to bag a peak or trail run and just get it done as quickly as possible. I find that if we can hone that skill of sitting in silence and observing and listening to nature, whether it's like, there's so much healing properties, like you mentioned, the whistling of the breeze through the trees, watching the coyote go through the grasslands in the Rancho Sierra, like I've been definitely promoting that much more, like learning how to slow down when you're on the trail. And your answer is just such a stamp on that, just like we have to learn how to slow down, and being out in nature allows us to, I really feel it forces us to be present. Which is really rare. It helps us escape the noise of everyday life, the city, and also hopefully that area has no cell reception, so you're not getting notifications. So you're forced to. But I like that 10 to 12 minutes. Sit in silence or just observe your surroundings under a tree, or maybe you're at an overlook. Like, thank you for really bringing that home for us.
I'll give you another example. Like I said, I used to go by Spirit Hawk. And I always admired red-tailed hawks, and I still do. But as I got older, and a shameless plug.
Please plug.
When I wrote the Tataviam Toi, it was inspired by, I've been working at the Santa Susana Field Lab. And the Santa Susana Field Lab is right by my tribal ancestral village of Tapu. So it's in Simi Valley. It's 2,600 acres, maybe 2,800 acres, but it's a big site. And it's very contaminated. It's where we tested a lot of our rocket engines for our space program. For 6 years, I was one of the monitors. So whenever they were digging in the ground and getting soil samples, they had to have a native monitor there, because there's some very sensitive sites there, rock art sites and solstice sites and things like that. So, but it's mostly open space, undisturbed, never built on. So the oak tree population is tremendous. The animal, there's more mountain lions in that 2,600 acres than any other 2,600 acres in Southern California. And I became fascinated with this small little bird that hopped and ran and would very rarely fly, and it stayed in the brush, and they were just kind of cute. They don't have, they're not like a mockingbird, they're not a songbird, they have a little simple little tweet, you know. And I just became fascinated with these little birds, and I realized, like I said, I'm not one of those mystical, magical people. I didn't want to know if I see a towhee, it means good luck, it means bad luck, it means this or means that. I just was fascinated with this little bird. And I never saw them fly very high, so I came up with the story of why they don't fly too high. They stay in the brush. And this is one lesson I learned. If we didn't have small little birds, we would be overtaken by all the bugs and insects and spiders. There's enough of them right now that if we kill each other and all humans are gone, everyone will say, yeah, well, the cockroaches are still going to be here. But not only the cockroaches, the ants, all the bugs, the caterpillars, the mosquitoes, the flies, all those little insects will basically, they'll be the dominant animals. If we didn't have those little small birds eating them, we would be overwhelmed by mosquitoes. We'd be overwhelmed by spiders that are poisonous, you know, brown recluse. So I go, oh, little birds are very important. We need them. And on my list of things to do before I die is to go back to Hanford, California. And I go there all the time. My mom is buried there, so I go and visit my mom with flowers on her grave. But I haven't done this, and I'm going to do it in the next year or so. I'm going to go to Hanford for my little trip, and I'm going to go out to the country. I'm going to shut my radio off, shut my phone off, and drive out in the country with my windows down, going 10 miles an hour, because you can still do that out in the country, and no one will honk their horn at you. They'll just drive around you. Because I want to hear the meadowlarks. Because when I was a little boy and we lived in Hanford, I would go up in the various orchards. So there was a walnut orchard, there was plum and apricot orchards, and various horse ranches and dairy farms. And one of the birds that was prominent were meadowlarks. They have a beautiful yellow feathered chest. They're about that big, and they have a beautiful song that they sing. They're a songbird, and it's very unique. You know, I can Google it and I can hear it, but I want to hear it the way I heard it for the first time as a little boy. Like, wow, that's a beautiful song that bird is singing. And I need to hear that one more time. Not on a 10-second, you know, what does
on your app
a meadowlark sound like? I want to hear it out where I first heard it, out in the countryside, the farming country of Hanford, California. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful.
So I encourage everyone, go out there and find your favorite songbird, and then sit and listen to them.
You know, I've had a moment also with a towhee bird. I was on top of this massive rock formation called Eagle Rock in Topanga State Park.
Huh?
Landed right in front of me, right on the ledge, and it just started singing.
Yeah.
And it was such a beautiful sound, and it was communicating with, I don't know if it was the ravens or the other towhee birds in the brush. And like what you mentioned, they don't fly very high. They stay in the low-hanging shrub, and they just kind of like hop around, and it's very like quirky, but also really fun to observe. And I'll never forget the sound of that towhee bird that was in front of me. It literally landed out of nowhere. I was like, this is like a gift of a moment. You know? I was like, I have that video on my phone. I'll have to show you. But thank you. And also these tribal books, I forgot to mention. Where can people find them to support you?
if they go to www.sunspritehandwork,
Okay.
sunspritehandwork.com. All of our books are there, and I haven't decided on in the next month or so. My wife and I will start working on our 5th book. I have a couple ideas because of my involvement with the Wildlife Bridge and P22. I'm thinking about writing the tribal story of P22.
Ooh, that would be incredible.
So there's been a few books written about P22. He had a fascinating life, but tribal beliefs and tribal aspects, the tribal way of looking is a little bit different than the scientists that have put the collars on and studying them, and a little bit different than the average person that's hiking and seeing mountain lions when they're out hiking. I'm seriously considering, and I have a theory, and I'll share the theory with you, and this will be a large part of the book. As far as I know, I haven't been able to find any traditional tribal stories, Southern California tribal stories, about mountain lions. If anyone sees this and they know
Really?
of any traditional stories of a mountain lion, please send them to me. And I've never heard of any. There's bear clans, there's eagle clans. I think the Choctaw still have spider clans and some small creatures. I know there's a dolphin clan in the Santa Barbara area, but I've never heard in modern times of a mountain lion clan. And I have a theory, and my theory is real simple. The mountain lion is a top predator, very highly respected as a hunter. So I'm sure they were used as teachers, and my educated guess is there used to be mountain lion clans, but the mountain lion is very stealth, secretive. I hear this all the time. People go, I went for a hike and I felt like I was being watched while I was hiking. And
I've had that experience.
And they go, and I felt it was not a lizard, not a towhee. It was a mountain lion or something big was watching me. And mountain lions, that's how they survive. They blend in with the plants. They're very stealthy. So it just seems to me that the mountain lion clans were clans of people that hunted when other people didn't hunt.
They always see us, but we never see
Yes.
them.
And they just are camouflaged. They blend in and we don't notice them. And that's the way they want it. They don't want to be noticed. The mountain lion doesn't want to be noticed. She just wants to hunt, feed her young. The young males, they just want to find a mate and hunt. So that could possibly be. It's going to be a future book.
Please make that.
Yeah. So
And
I'll end on that.
So I got 2 more questions for
Okay.
you, and this is actually the perfect segue because you're speaking on mountain lions, and you mentioned something just a few moments ago that really caught my attention. You were a part of quite the experience, an intimate experience, as it relates to LA wildlife history, and that being you oversaw, or you were part of the group that oversaw the burial of our beloved P22, the mountain lion. And I believe he died back in December 2022, and that's such a unique moment to preside over. Like, what was that experience like, and does the mountain lion hold any kind of special symbolism to your native tribes?
There's a couple things about P22 and the tribal involvement with P22 when he was euthanized. None of us were surprised that he was euthanized. We all were kept in the loop. We knew that he was struggling, that he had a lot of health problems. 12 years old is old for a mountain lion. They don't usually live that long in the wild. Most of the tribal people were at peace when we found out that he'd been euthanized, and we weren't upset. what we were upset with was that he was frozen and put in a freezer.
He was frozen?
Yes. And that the Museum of Natural History of LA County had filled out a permit a year before claiming his body. That when he died, they wanted his body for science.
An exhibit.
They said there was never any discussion or plans of having a taxidermy, stuff him and putting him on display.
Okay.
And that's not worth discussing or debating. But it's an example of tribal people have different perspectives than the general population lots of times. Sometimes we have the same perspective. I mean, trust me, I was listening to a native woman talk about native plants. And she talked like native peoples are experts, are the expert on native plants and protecting the environment. And I thought of Richard Attenborough. There are thousands and thousands of Richard Attenboroughs out there. People that are not tribal, don't claim to be tribal, but still love the environment, still love, the mountain lions, the wolves, the bears. When those people don't reach out to tribal people to also include us in that, things usually will go astray. And they were headed in that direction. They wanted to keep P-22 basically frozen, and occasionally do some scientific studies. So they would take him out and remove maybe some more of his kidneys, some more of his liver, some more of his lungs and heart, and various things, and take some bones and do some carbon dating or whatever. We question the Museum of Natural History. When you took out that permit a year before he passed away, you should have reached out to the native community to let us know this is what's going to happen and how do we feel about that. We were never asked. So now we're telling them how we feel about it. But and our first question to the Museum of Natural History and the people with the San Diego Zoo, where he was at when he was euthanized, is what has been done to him so far. They go, oh, we just took very small samples of his liver, kidneys, lungs, and I think that was it. Maybe a little bit of blood. We go, when you say a little bit, can you be a little bit more precise? They go, less than 0.5%. We go, so 99.9 and a half of P-22 is still there and still intact. Yes. It took some of his fur, I think, too, but just a little piece, a few hairs. We got together, we had some meetings, Tongva Gabrielino, Shoshone, Tataviam, Chumash, and for whatever reason, because I was involved with the wildlife bridge for 4 or 5 years prior to that, I was the lead. So I reached out to various tribal leaders that I knew and said, this is what has happened. What would, as tribal people, what would we like to have happen? And it was unanimous. All tribal people, along with a lot of other people. Beth Pratt felt the same way. We don't want any more testing done on P-22. There will be dozens of other P-22s that are going to come along, that are going to get hit by cars, that are going to die. Some will be young, some will be old, and you'll be able to do testing on them. P-22 is a leader within his community, and he's a leader within the Native American community. He's a leader within the environmental community, an environmentalist. We go, he deserves a respectful burial, no more samples taken, and we want to be involved with picking the site where he's buried, and we will run the ceremony. And we will have carte blanche on who's there. And we're going to be fair about it. So it was a very small group, Beth Pratt and people from National Park Service, people from the Museum of Natural History, Fish and Wildlife were there. So people from various large nonprofits, people from government agencies, national parks, Fish and Wildlife, Museum of Natural History, which is a large organization. 4 or 5 different tribes were represented. And we did what I talked about earlier. We formed a coalition to try as best as possible to give this majestic, one of a special mountain lion a respectful burial. And we did. And as far as I know, of those 20, 25 people that were there, I do this all the time. I've been within a half mile of where he's buried. And let's say we're at that spot that's a half mile from where he's buried, and he would be buried right this way, a half a mile away. And I'll go, he's buried in the Santa Monica Mountains somewhere, where he was born. We have been able to give him his privacy and the respect that we believe he deserves. And that's not just tribal people. That was Robert Rock, who's overseeing the Wildlife Bridge and is an architect. So scientific people, lay people, all came together for a common good. So it can be done.
It is so incredible how P22, the burial ceremony of P22 was the catalyst of this coalition of different tribes, government agencies, different other organizations all coming together when maybe normally you all wouldn't be speaking to each other or having a certain line of communication. I find that very powerful, that he was that beacon and that the catalyst for that.
So like I said, it can be done. Now we need to build on it. My understanding is the Wildlife Bridge they're building at Agora Hills is going to be the first of many. And they're actually already planning several at what is called the Newhall Pass. And I think there's some places in Northern California where they're looking at some wildlife bridges, some tunnels where they build basically a big tunnel underneath bridges so animals can go underneath it.
I just love that. I'm still thinking back to the burial story and the people that were present. That's really powerful.
We have a long way to go.
Yeah.
So people, it's not going to be done overnight. It's going to be probably realistically. I hope it's a 100-year project. That's what we have to look at.
Long
it's
term,
going to take us 100 years. It's taken us over 200 years to get here. To whereas the tribal population in California was almost extinct. In 1900, almost all tribal population throughout all of California was this close to extinction. Almost every tribe was close to extinction. The Chumash were close to extinction. You know, the Tataviam, there was less than 50 Tataviam people. We were very close to extinction. We've started revitalizing tribal cultures, realizing, no, they're an important part of America. They're an important part of California. The wolves are coming back. The bears are coming back. We need to bring all three back, the native plants, the oak trees, and bring them all back. Let me point out something that I just realized. When I said my ancestors for over 50 years were enslaved at the missions. Ventura, some of them came to Ventura, some of them were, most were at the San Fernando, but California tribal people were slaves. They were free labor at these missions. So when people go to the missions and go, God, this is a beautiful building. Look, this tile and the plaster work and the grounds are beautiful. We built it. The Indians built it. When California became a state, most of the people the gold rush people, they used tribal people to do the hard physical labor work. We were the farm workers, we were the ranch hands, we were the cooks and the maids when California became a state. California had slavery, they just called it indentured servants, and they had apprentice programs for native peoples. And it just allowed California people. So one of the most wealthy places on earth, California, where the resources are just extremely abundant. California had 30 years of free labor. Us.
Oh my goodness.
So California was built, and let me be very clear on this. America was built by African slaves. When you take a country that has as much resources as it has, and you have 100 years of free labor, and then another 100 years of labor at an extremely discounted price, even an idiot can be successful. And we've proved that recently. California is exactly the same. It was built by the tribal people. We built this state. 100 years of free labor that the Spanish and American governments got on some land that if they paid us, it still would have been great. California, in my humble opinion, is the greatest state in the United States of America. Our resources are beyond compare.
So bountiful,
Yeah.
so abundant.
But when you throw in, you get free labor. If you and I wanted to start a restaurant on Main Street, and we had a good idea, and plus, for the first 20 years, we're going to get free labor, it would be a successful restaurant.
Oh yeah, supercharged.
Yeah.
It'll be very, very accessible.
California was built by tribal people. And that needs to be acknowledged, and we need to be repaid. So help tribal people, help tribal authors like myself. Cindy Alvitri, Tony Flores is a Chumash woman writing Chumash books. You know, support native artists. There's Leah Mata, tremendous artists and abalone jewelry that she makes. Just incredible. Support them. Support native businesses. When my cousin and I start Native Roots, support us. We deserve to be supported. Because all those other nurseries, Green Thumb, you know why they're successful? Because of my ancestors. That's why they're successful. Theodore Payne, you know why it's successful? Because of my ancestors. That's why they're successful. It's time to repay those debts.
Mic drop. Wow, I have nothing more to add to that or to say. Thank you for just sharing your deep perspective, Alan. This conversation is going to impact a lot of people that are hearing it. It's already impacted me greatly. I have one more question to ask you before we start wrapping this up. So, my last question, just to bring it back to the adventurous part of things. If there was one outdoor experience or adventure you could relive all over again, what would that be for you?
Wow, that's tough.
Just one. Take a moment to process that.
Just one. I'd have to say, if I could be a dark water paddler one more time.
One more time?
One more time, that's what I would choose. And to show you how hard of a decision that is, I said, I so desperately want to run a 100-meter race against other 70-year-olds just to see where I'm at. Just to see where I'm at. So that's 1A. But yeah, I'd have to say, being a dark water paddler one more time, and the ultimate would be if my son and grandson could be in that crew with me, I would be as giddy as a 16-year-old that just passed their driver's test. and Mom and Dad promised them a brand new Corvette.
I love that analogy.
Which I can't, that's beyond my comprehension. I did pass my driver's test, but I had a 61 Ford, four-door. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank
That
you
would
for
be
sharing that. So we're at the end of the conversation, at the end of the episode, but I always turn the spotlight back to the guest before we conclude it. Alan, do you have any final words, any final thoughts you want to share with the audience, the Just Trek community, to your community, the tribal community?
Yeah, I'll close on this. I've been going to schools, and when I say schools, everywhere from preschools to universities and even senior centers. And I'll ask questions. And I keep asking these same questions, hoping that I'll get a better response, that people know about California Indian history, that they have heard of the Tataviam, that they've heard about the bounty system, that they know what really happened at the missions, that they weren't resorts. So my hope is that when I go to school, I have to physically go to that school and I talk to 30 fourth graders. Mm-hmm. And when they become adults, they'll remember maybe one thing that this old Indian man told them. And I've gone, I need to reach a bigger audience. And I'm not sure how that is supposed to happen. You know, I keep waiting for Scorsese to call me and say he wants to make a movie, and I'll be his main advisor, and I'll have a cameo as an old elder on it, and it'll tell the true history, and millions of people will see this movie about California Indians and what really happened at the missions, and then I won't have to go to school after school after school after school. So if somehow some young person that is way smarter than me, that knows how they can make animated videos about our stories, and a documentary filmmaker goes, I want to tell the true story of the California missions. I want to tell the true story about the bounty system and what happened to California Indians and the 300 massacres. Because me just going out telling a few people here and there, I'm not moving the needle. So if someone's watching this and goes, I know how to do that, I can do that. Please.
And by you saying it out loud, you are manifesting it. And the purpose of this podcast is to elevate and amplify the voices of our guests on the show. And you're just such a unique indigenous voice. Like, I have a feeling it'll happen.
All right.
Hope to help make it happen as well. So we're at the end of the episode. Wow, what a conversation. It felt like a movie with so many different chapters. I mean, you've had such a lifelong of work and adventures and stories. And Alan Salazar, tribal elder, indigenous voice, Chumash ancestry, Tataviam, Just Trek podcast, elevation is our recreation. Thank you so much, Alan, for granting me the opportunity to amplify your voice and share this story. This is a conversation I'm going to remember for a very long time, and I think our audience and community. So thank you.
And to our leaders back in Washington, D.C., this is how you should acknowledge the crowd. Not the way you did the other day. Here are our prayers.
Amen to that. Thank you, Alan.